Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Musician's Mentor Podcast. As per usual, I'm your host, Travis Mark, and today I have the distinct pleasure of speaking with the one and only Mr. David Tweedie. David is an American-born composer, multi-instrumentalist, and record producer based in California, and was an absolute delight to have on the show because I really got to pick his brain on sync licensing, placements, and getting your music on TV and film in general because he's had so much success in that space. Composing original pieces and spots for shows like So You Think You Can Dance, The Bernie Mac Show, Nash Bridges, The Wild Ride, MTV Celebrity Rap Superstar, and a host of others. David also plays in Enspirits, the band that I mentioned a few episodes back with Victoria Theodore. So if you didn't check them out then, please make sure you check them out now. The links are in our show notes. On the note of show notes, don't forget to check out our partnership with the lovely folks over at Soundbrenner. Likewise, and I know that this is a bit random, but strangely, in the last 3 weeks, I've had numerous emails from people suggesting that maybe I start a Patreon page. Now, I've not really looked into this much at all, but I was wondering, is that really something that you guys would be interested in? And if so, what sort of content would you want to see there? As usual, before we get into this interview, please do me a favor and leave us a rating, a review, a share, a like, or a follow across your favorite streaming platforms or social medias. It's extremely helpful and helps us continue to get guests like David on the show. For now, let's jump straight into it. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Mr. Dave Tweedie. Dave Tweedie, thank you so much for joining me on the Musician's Mentor Podcast. I know that, I've spoken to you for a couple minutes here beforehand, but now that we've hit the record button, do me a favor and just tell my listeners just a brief, possibly seems a bit redundant, but just a brief outlook as to who Dave Tweedie is. Tell us a little bit about what you've done, what you may be currently doing, and just something that might allow them to get an idea of who you are during the course of this interview.
Sure. So I am a Los Angeles-based composer, producer, writer, and multi-instrumentalist. And I've been playing music pretty much my whole life. I come from the Bay Area, Oakland, and I was up there for a long time. And I've been in LA now for 15 years. And so I've done a lot of things when it comes to writing and performing, and so there's not much that I probably haven't done in terms of that kind of stuff. So I've worked in television as a composer. I've worked on films and documentaries as a composer. I've been in countless original projects, and I've worked with countless songwriters and producers, and I just kind of made this my whole life since I started playing music when I was probably in third grade, is where it all started, and all the way to now, where this last year I did a 5-part series for Hulu ABC called Dear Santa.
Cool.
And it's a continuation of a series that I started in 2020, all under the name Dear Santa. In 2020, I did the movie for them. Then I did a 6-part series in 2022 for them. And this is all, like I said, Hulu ABC. And that just came out. And so then currently I have 3 different artists that I'm producing, all of which kind of come from different backgrounds and are different stages of their careers. But people come to me, I'm recommended to people, or vice versa, from all walks of life. It's interesting because it's music, which is just a reflection of life after all, right?
Yeah.
And just I don't think about age or we have such a focus on youth, and I get that. It's always sort of amazing to see that, but I tend to look at it like people that are kind of a little more remarkable, or people that make it in this and do it over years and are able to continue being relevant. And it's easy. It's kind of easy to be pretty and young and talented, but much harder to maintain that when you've been in this for a while. That's the real testament to one's sort of determination and maybe ability.
It's so interesting that you brought that up because I recently had a discussion. I was finishing up a gig, and the usual guitarist on that particular gig couldn't make it, and so the band brought in this real hotshot of a guitarist who happened to be 20. I mean, this guy was impeccably good for his age. Not that it matters, because again, I've seen guys who are older that are incredible, and I've seen guys who are younger that are incredible.
Sure.
And everybody was going, man, oh my God, I can't believe he's 20. And it's funny because I myself have been doing this pretty much like you my entire life. And it occurred to me during the course of this conversation exactly what you just said. I started to kind of think, it is impressive. I mean, this guy's like barely driving and like he can play like that. But then I started to think about and not to kind of twist this into a negative sounding thing, but I started to think about like exactly what you said. Like, when you've had nothing else to do but sit and practice for years on end and then start doing gigs, that's a very exciting thing. But when you go, fast forward into like the career side of it to make sure, hey, can I still make money? Can I pay my bills? That's a whole different thing. So, I'm not trying to just kind of compare. I just kind of thought, it's funny that you said that because I recently, like literally a few days ago, I got into that mind space and I was like, that's a real interesting way of thinking about it, Anyway, I want to segue a bunch of different things there, starting with, well, let me try to do this chronologically. So,
Sure.
starting with your upbringing, you said California, you're based there. From what I read, Richmond was where you were born. Now, I don't necessarily know all the ins and outs of that, but I'd like for you to please talk to me about a couple things. One, you mentioned third grade, and from what I read, trumpet was your first instrument. Now, I could be wrong there, but talk to me about how, you picking up a trumpet came about. And then again, we're obviously trying to fast forward and condense decades here. But tell me how the trumpet turned into, hey, I now play drums, turned into, original bands doing these gigs and these tours and these support slots and turns into, well, you're Dave Tweedie and you've now composed tons for TV and film. And I read about some of the artists you've produced. I mean, you briefly touched on it there. Like, what is the first thing that lets the music bug bite you? And what then leads to these different segues along that path?
Sure. So I would probably the biggest thing was my in a lot of ways was my dad. My dad always had the radio on in the house. Loved music. And my dad had a friend also, I didn't know it, I was too young to understand at the time, but who was a drummer who knew really great music. So my dad had great music taste. So at home, I was born in the late 60s. And so at home, a lot of Beatles, a lot of Stevie Wonder, a lot of Sly Stone, a lot of Chicago, so it was a great foundation to hear that. Plus everything was on the radio. So the radio was always on. I was always hearing it and just completely, different kids have different things. I was really loved just listening to music. So here we go. We're moving along. And then, disco happened. That was one of the other things that kind of happened. And my sister had one of those air organs, and we would pretend like we had a band. And like, in my mind, we had a band, My sister's 2.5 years older, so she loved it. It was fun. We'd pretend like we're putting a little, doing our little thing. So when I was in third grade and, at school, and then they have the music program, and they're like, hey, you can play you can play in the band. What do you want to play? The truth was, I didn't know anybody who played music at all. Nobody I knew played an instrument, did anything. So I just knew that the cool kids, the boys particularly, that were like the cool kids who I was trying to fit in with, they played trumpet. So I was like, okay, I'm going to play trumpet too. Fair enough. So luckily I had the aptitude and the embouchure to be able to play the instrument. And what ended up happening was a few things kind of, so initially I'm playing, I'm learning how to read music supposedly, but what ended up really happening is that I wasn't really reading. I was earing everything.
Interesting.
And so they didn't discover this till later. So But so third grade, by the sixth grade, they're sending me over to play with the high school kids to play trumpet with them because I have a great ear. I can hear it, and I can blend and sound good, and you know. But it wasn't until I think the seventh grade where they discovered that I wasn't reading, and so that was a moment. But my music teacher at that point, I had just picked up drums. And that's but it was so I picked up drums, and that came from a very different thing. That came from walking down the street and I heard a kid playing drums and I walked by this kid's house 2 or 3 times, and finally I just went and knocked on the door, and his like mom answered. I was like, "Hey, can I come in here and check it out?" And kid was playing like an old Rogers drum kit, and he's playing all this kind of like funk R&B stuff, Brothers Johnson and Wild Cherry and all this stuff, and he's working on Brick House. And so I just sat there and listened to that for a few days, and then sat down, watched him just tapping on my legs, sat down, and I was able to play it, like just had the coordination. So yeah, so it all kind of that's where it all sort of stemmed from. And then like anybody else, you're a kid and you're like, who doesn't want to be a rock star? MTV happens, all this stuff. Oh, this is amazing! I want to do all that stuff. And so some of it was probably pretty. There's kind of a few things. Probably part of it was pretty surface level. We'll be a rock star, and well, like any other crazy kid. But the funny thing was, the more that I really started playing drums, the more that music started to really reveal itself to me. And not only did it reveal itself to me, the culture and community where things came from opened up. And I started to see people very differently than I was sort of brought up to believe things were. And so it started really, really open up my head to what were and also what things weren't. So I just kept going on that path. And to this day, I still practice drums. That is not my primary source of income, though I'm definitely known in that world, and I definitely get calls to do things. And I love doing it, but it was just, as time went on, being a writer and all that kind of came along. I sort of picked up guitar and bass. Who actually taught me how to play my first pentatonic scale was Larry Lalonde from Primus.
Wow.
Because I grew up with a lot of guys up in the Bay Area that ended up being did really well. I grew up with Billy Joe and Mike Dirnt from the Green Day.
I read about this.
Yeah, I'm still friends with Mike. Billy I'll know forever. I've known Billy since and his brothers and sisters since he was 4 years old. We were on the swim team together.
Wow.
We all, if I saw Billy tomorrow, it'd be like, hey,
yeah,
we grew up. You know how it is with that. Yeah. And we all still play music. So there's a combination.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'll say this. I mean, my career, like I said, it really started as one thing, I think, and wanted to be in hard rock bands and all the stuff that was happening in the 80s. But then, man, the more I went down the drumming path, the more that it really revealed the essence of what this whole thing is about. And the real, just, I don't know, man, the infinite possibilities that music opens you up to spiritually, philosophically, physically, everything. It's such a trippy thing. And so I've always sort of leaned on that side of it. And then, like, no matter what happened in my personal life, my career kept growing, but also I kept pushing and I kept learning. I still do. I still practice guitar every week, pretty much 3 or 4 days a week. I get up and have coffee and just work on guitar. Yeah. And I'll never be like an amazing shredding guitar player because I kind of have paused from being a drummer for so long. So my pinky, you can see that one locks.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But I find my way around it. I'll work with more 3 fingers. And the truth is, I mean, how many great guitar players are there in the world? I can hire somebody if I need someone to shred some solo.
Yeah.
But 90% of everything I've done has been on my own, and that goes for everything. That's why it gets kind of broad. It's like, and I don't really talk about this. Most people make a big deal about this stuff. I have been the primary guy on all the recordings, everything I've done primarily for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
I've played all the, someone might play little keys, might be a little something there, but I'm doing everything else.
Yeah.
And I didn't do it out of ego. I kind of actually did it out of necessity to make money.
Yeah.
That was the fact of the matter. It was just, I could make more money if I could play it all. And it also kind of, maybe more importantly, was I stopped having to sort of like try to explain to somebody what I was hearing in my head, because I am slightly savant with music. I can hear it fully done in my head. And so I'm basically just like coloring by numbers at that point to fill in this fully sort of like, if I hear someone's song, I'm like, I choose this like an ABC. I'm like, I can do this version or that version, this version, but I hear these versions very, very clearly, and I'm just sort of like filling in where I need to get to.
Yeah. Which, from a studio point of view, especially in the days which I know they still exist, but not to the extent that they used to. When you're paying by the hour and there's the big red digital clock and you having to explain to people, well, no, I need this type of bass line, but you could just go play it. You're saving hours,
Oh, absolutely.
So like from a money point of view, that makes a lot of sense. And again, it's tricky because in an hour's conversation to talk to somebody like you and try and cover all the bases, it's near impossible. And so, I've got certain questions, especially when it comes to the producer and composer stuff that I want to get to. So I'm going to now, once again, try and like super fast forward here, even though we might segue back.
Yeah. I was going to mention one thing just to get back to the question, to answer the question.
Yeah.
The thing that has paid the most dividends is trumpet is a single note instrument. So for top lining and for voice leading and note, so I have that naturally. I can make infinite melodies also. Melodies are easy breezy. Drumming, so I have the main components for most productions.
Yeah.
I've got the feel, got all that. I know all that is. And I know all the single note stuff, and so I generally write all the top line melody on stuff also because I just hear it all clear as day. So so the only thing I've always done is I've always collaborated with singers. So I'm doing everything else, and I love to collaborate with singers and people that play instruments also. And if they're good at it, then I've worked. One of my main partners was Stephen Bradley from No Doubt.
Wow.
So Steve and I were together, publishing deal and writing songs for a good chunk, about 20 years.
Yeah.
Fabulous trumpet player, obviously great singer, great top liner, plays keys also. So he definitely on our stuff, he played a portion of the keys, but it was always, for the most part, the stuff that we worked on, it was the genesis. A lot of times was coming from me.
Yeah, and the partnerships actually quite important because I think again in a time where a lot of guys are doing a lot of home producing, and I'm an advocate for it. I think if you really do use your ears well and you take the time to do it properly, you can get good results. It's been proven. But I think sometimes the idea of collaboration and partnership and stuff like that, I think sometimes it's almost neglected now because a lot of guys are like, well, I can just pull in this sample from whatever company and I can loop that and then I can do this. And listen, some of it's turning out great. So I'm not trying to diss that or talk negatively about it. I just think like to have a partnership with someone like Stephen for 20 years or so, that's really quite something. Okay. So I'm going to once again flip this back to where I was going to go.
Deeper movement.
Yeah. And listen, we might jump around a bit. I read something. I'm going to start getting into the producer, writer, composer sort of segue of your career. When I was doing my research about you and stuff, I read something sort of touching on what you just spoke about, but in a slightly different regard. It basically said that like every recording you had ever been involved with, you would sit there and you would watch the guys mix and like ask questions and learn and things like that. And again, not to compare, but this really hit me because this is something I always did. In every band I was in, everybody else would leave and I'd be sitting there, and I'm sure the guy who was producing or mixing or anything in those times, they probably wanted me to leave too, but I was just watching. I didn't know what I was watching, but I was watching, and why did you do that? So, that didn't sound right. I probably bugged the shit out of them, to be fair, but I didn't realize that subconsciously I was learning. Till eventually, many years later, I'll end up working at studios and again, learning. And many, many, many years later, I'll end up producing people. And had you told me when I started that would be happening, I'd be like, no, man, that's like the the Gil Nortons and the Chris Lord Alges, and those are those guys. I'll never be those guys, but it's funny what you can learn from watching. So the thing that I read along that sort of story where it mentioned the studio stuff, it said that you had always been interested in studios, etc., 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 and then eventually got a little bit of information from Busby, the late great Busby. I was a huge fan of Busby. He's a whole different cat to talk about. But about buying some gear, and I was wondering, what was the information that Busby gave you that led to you starting your actual? Well, now I own the studio.
Yeah. So I met Buzz really quickly when he was 19. He's a trombone player, and I was 26. We met on a weird Grateful Dead tour of all things that he got brought in last minute, and they put us in a hotel room together, and we woke up just chit chatting and started a whole relationship. I had already made records and done all this stuff. He grew up in the church and all that, but long story short, he was amazing, dear friend. I miss him so fucking much. It's one of those things. So, but that being said, to answer that question, so he was working for he was Eric Valentine's first engineer, and Eric Valentine did all this, Smash Mouth and Third Eye Blind and Good Charlotte and Queens of Stone Age and so much cool stuff. Aqualung, even,
Wow.
He's amazing. And he really was an early, like myself, but even before me, he was an early adopter of Pro Tools and all that kind of stuff. So the gear that was coming through Busby, people would be sending Valentine all sorts of stuff. So he would know what's going on. So some of the stuff, and it's still to this day. So there's a few things. My Rhodes piano, my 88, I traded Busby for a drum set back in 1996 because he wanted to work on drums and I wanted a Rhodes. So I went to his mom's house where he was living. He was 19 still, and he had 3 Rhodes in the room. So I picked a Rhodes. I still have that Rhodes. It's an amazing Rhodes. So many people played it on it, and because it's there. There's a bunch of stuff. I have a bunch of Chameleon Lab 7602s, which were Neve clones, and he was like, "Just dude, get these." I just had them worked on, clean, because it was getting a little gritty and all stuff or whatever. But man, I've had these for like 20 years. That was a recommendation from him. Sansamp RBI for bass, another recommendation from him. My Tannoy System 8 speakers were something that he worked on for a bunch of years, and then I adopted those also. I have some Seb Adams also that I use, but I still have one of the 5-string basses from him. We go. It was interesting career wise. When people blast off into the galaxies like he did, and you're good friends with them, there's a certain point where you have to sort of like let them. He definitely tried to help me as he went along, but it all goes how it goes, and he had to go do his thing. The kind of heartbreaking part for me is that we really connected deeply about 2 years before he died, and we got right back to where we were at, and it was very serendipitous. And so when he passed, it was like, I still struggled to wrap my head around it.
Yeah.
I am a firm believer of everything goes down how it's supposed to happen, and just for us to make sense of it. But and so there's that side of it. And one would think, hey, that's great, and there's a lot to be derived from like that gear. And by the way, all this stuff works great. I use it to this day. But the big thing about Buzz was the information that he shared with me. And there's a few of them. I'll just share a quick
Please,
few anecdotes. Yeah, well, a few of them was, I did really well in the sync world, and so I was cranking all this stuff out, getting stuff in television shows on stuff, and he'd come by and hear this stuff and be like, "This is amazing," but writing hit songs is different. And he told me, to write hit songs and be in that world, to be a really great pop writer, you have to paint with one paintbrush, with one color, in a 2-inch frame, and you have to move me, and you have to move me over and over and over using this. And it was a really good way, because it's a very small little thing trying to do. And so he got really, really good at that. And it just made me, though I wasn't always able, like, I had plenty of opportunities. If I had gone the route that he was like, here, this is how it goes, I'm sure I would have had many things be very different in my career. The fact of the matter is, though, I love music so much, but as he would say, I'm a little more of a muso. I love jazz fusion. I love playing jazz fusion. I like improvising something else. I'm really good. That's why I'm a good writer. I can just crank stuff out and make it, and it has that thing. But I'm on to the next thing,
Yeah.
I'm not going to write that song again. I will if I need to, but that's not going to be my inclination. And in his case, you basically, to a certain degree, you're churning out things that are very, very similar
Formula.
in a repetitive way and formula, but still making them sound fresh and amazing, which he was obviously a master at.
Okay, so you touched on the sync world, and I mean, again, your credits in that placement, sync, TV, movie composition world are numerous. I'll put them in my show notes for when this episode comes out so people can read a bit about it. But let's talk about the start of that before we kind of get into some of the big ones you've done, which I will mention today. But to get into placements and syncing and eventually actually being hired to compose for shows, etc., 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 What are some things that people should start learning about if that's the route they want to potentially go? And as boring as some of the stuff potentially might get to talk about from an administrative point of view, what should they know when it comes to like performance rights organizations and copyrights and things like that if they're trying to do it independently versus having teams of admin people?
Right. So maybe we'll work backwards with that. So the one thing you want to be able to do is like if you're going to get into any of this stuff, you'll have to be affiliated with a performance rights society, whether it be SASAC, BMI, or ASCAP. I'm with ASCAP. And the copyright thing in terms of like copyright. Someone was talking to me about that the other day. I don't think I've copyrighted anything ever.
Wow.
I think. Well, I think there's a few things, and how it's been brought to my attention was simply this. Few things. So when my songs are registered with ASCAP, there's a whole host of other things that comes along with that. Obviously, all my information. But the real truth of the matter is that your timestamp on your hard drive that'll hold up in court of law. And for me, I've always said, hey, I hope someone takes my stuff and goes crazy with it, makes a ton of money. I'll let them run as far as they want to run with it, and then I'll come get my money.
Yeah.
Because I've got the timestamps on all my hard drives, and and that'll that clarifies everything. Yeah, and the fact of the matter is, this gets into a whole other conversation, which is probably we don't have time for, but it's like, at a certain point, everything is everything. Everything comes from someone else's thing, and there's just so much stuff. And so, one of my jobs as a sync writer, and I'll keep going backwards, one of my jobs for So You Think You Can Dance was I was their quote unquote sound around guy. And, I did 48 episodes of that stuff where not only was I creating material that was made for their packages, which is when they were talking to a contestant and there's background music for that stuff, but also whenever they couldn't get a license for somebody, I was hired to make the song that they would replace it with.
Very
And
cool.
they were pretty stringent in that they wanted something that was it needed to fully, encompass the sentimentality of the song and the vibe, and it should make you feel the same exact energy. Now, one thing I will say, this is like, completely sort of like things happened up to that got me there, but I sort of fell into that. I've never been one to sit around and learn other people's songs. It was never my thing. I knew a few songs on guitar, your normal tropes, like
Yeah.
Superstition
Yeah.
or a Beatles song or two or a Led Zeppelin song, just some campfire stuff. And I knew a few things on piano, but very little compared to what like someone who does that for a living and plays all that stuff. So, but what I did have a knack for, and I think it's why the stuff that I have done has always resonated to a certain degree, is that I had a deep sense of the sentimentality of songs and like what that is and what those feelings are and how to regenerate that. And I use that in my own music and all that stuff. I know exactly if I want to make someone feel a certain way, I know how to do that. Again, that comes in though. I didn't go to music school. I don't have any formal background with this. That's the slightly savant part of my personality that and it's almost like a childlike part of it that I've tapped into, that I've never let go of. And that those songs that made me feel that way, I'm like, well, what is it about those songs? And there's a certain way the melodies move, and there's a certain way the dynamics, it's all that stuff. So if we keep going backwards into it. So I basically got into all of it through, my first taste of anything about the sync was I was working with a band, and we were in the Bay Area, and there was a show called Nash Bridges, and Cheech Moran was in that band from Cheech and Chong, and Don Johnson. They were the two guys, right? And Cheech, but I was in a 12-piece, sometimes 13-piece Latin funk band that did really, really well in the Bay Area. And Cheech loved our band, so he licensed one of our songs for that. And then after that, he was like, "Hey, we got these other shows coming up, and I want these specific things." So we went and cut the stuff. So I was like, "Okay, that's kind of how that works." I got a little, but I was just playing drums at that point. A few years later, another friend of mine went to work for Roger Corman, who's kind of the king of the B movies, conquered new horizons. Every star up until like '90s got their start with there. And a friend of mine became a clearance guy, to try to get the license for stuff. And they had a Jack Nicholson film that was coming out, and they needed a new soundtrack made for it. And he was like, "Oh, you know how to do that, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, totally." No,
Yeah, fake it till you make it, man.
yes, exactly. So I had a friend of mine come in who was amazing. I'm still friends with a guy named Rand Singer, who just lost his house in the fire, by the way. Which,
Damn.
I love you, Rand. I'm sorry about that. And obviously, I've reached out to him. So I did that. So I ended up working for Roger Corman for a little while. I did a trailer for Sandra Bullock, two other things. So time and on, I started producing people and writing, and then again, another friend of mine who was a rapper actually was like, "Hey, man, this other friend of mine became a clearance guy for this music supervisor named Nancy Severinsen, who Doc Severinsen from the Tonight Show band, Johnny Carson, the band leader, trumpet player, his daughter. But she's a huge music supervisor in the business. So they started asking, me and my buddy Steve Bradley, who I mentioned earlier, to make hip hop tracks. They were having a hard time finding stuff that was like authentic but wasn't full of cursing. So
Yeah.
we set about to do that. So we worked on a bunch of shows, Bernie Mac show being one of them,
Yeah.
and just filling in gaps here and there. And then eventually, as luck would have it, I was sending out reels to people that I knew that were doing it. And he was one of them. And one of the songs that I had that I had just done by myself was they needed to, there was a Exhibit Dr. Dre track that they couldn't get licensed. And so they called me like, "Hey man, we have this song of yours that's like pretty kind of close to this vibe. If you can dial this thing up, man, we can probably get you synced." Man, I turned that thing around like a half an hour, like boom, dialed it up and sent it. And they were like, "Wow, this is like the fastest anybody's turned this thing around for us. Do you want a job?" And so that's how I landed the So You Think You Can Dance gig. It was literally just, opportunity knocked and I was ready.
Yeah. Yeah, and you've got to be ready. Everything I've ever read or heard or interviews, you got to be ready.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything worse than somebody finally getting the opportunity and not being ready. That's going to suck.
Yeah,
It'll haunt you.
It's almost getting you ready for, like, a lot of times, I mean, I worked on these MTV shows also. I'd get calls in the middle of the night for completely just stuff that I was like, "Hey, can you put an explosion on the end of this? Or we need this, we need a stinger indie. We don't have it, Okay, cool. Here you go."
Yeah.
So I think you dance would be like, I mean, I had a song called "Tore My Heart" that went to number 42 on the iTunes pop charts off of So You Think You Could Dance. It became the song of the season in season 4. And it started with, I had made like a 20-second piece for one of the other, series, season 3. I had made like a 20-second piece of the song. That was it. It was just like a 20 piece. It wasn't a whole song. I get a call on a Friday from a choreographer, and she was like, "I love that piece. Can I hear the whole song?" And I'm like, look, I'm out of town, but I'll be back on Monday. So I'll send it to you on Monday. She's like, "Please send it Monday morning." So I go in that whole weekend, crank the whole song. I write a whole song around this 20-second piece. And the singer I was dating at the time. She was sick. I barely got her on the thing. Sent it out to them. "Oh, we love it. It airs on Wednesday."
Wow,
And
man.
Season.
That's
It wasn't
amazing.
mastered. It wasn't even mastered. It was just, that's where I learned. I learned a lot about audio stuff also. Most of the stuff I was sending to them and they were airing was MP3s.
Interesting.
They didn't care.
Wow, because I mean, again, I've heard many stories similar in regards to like some of the bands that I follow. They aren't necessarily household name kind of bands, but they might have had like a minor hit back in the day. And so like they had careers, and a lot of these guys, same thing, songs got picked up and it was the demo version and the radio started playing the demo version and suddenly they were on tours. And it does happen. If it's of a certain quality, I think the average person, and I'll include a lot of musicians in this, I think a lot of people don't actually know the difference between mixing and mastering. And so like, not that that's a bad thing, but I think that sometimes if your mix is good enough and if it sounds of a certain quality, whether it's mastered or not, the average person isn't going to know because a lot of musicians don't even seem to know,
Well, absolutely not. And in television also, like, they're going to send it, like the company that I was working through was not working through, but they handle all this audio for American Idol, So You Think You Can Dance, plenty of other shows. They're called levels. The limiters and all the stuff that they have there, and they dealt with anyway, because on any given show you had like 50, 60 pieces of music, so they're the ones dealing with all that. They're gonna do their whole thing anyway, so it doesn't really, that part doesn't matter. And I will say this also, people listen to music, not to be audiophiles. There's nothing about it. And I'll say this, in the last 10 years, it's really proven the point, with all the lo-fi music and all the different kind of stuff that's out there, that's the whatever the barometer for what sounds good is so big now, which is kind of cool. I actually embrace it. I think it's cool. It's like, if it sounds cool, it's a cool song.
Exactly.
You're not, it doesn't have to be some like auditory, like, whoa, the most amazing thing. Now, don't get me wrong. I love that. And I have definitely a nerd side to me that like goes down that, that path sometimes for certain things, but other stuff, I'm just like, man, this has got a vibe.
Yeah.
Let's go with it.
Yeah,
I,
that's
I,
cool.
I use, I have one of my songs that I've done with my current project that was iPhone drums while the speakers were on 20 feet away from the drums. You can kind of hear the music in the background, but Victoria
Yeah,
had iPhones on my drums. I use those drums because I like this thing has so much vibe on this. I'm using this.
awesome.
People ask me all the time, "How'd you do those drums?" I'm like, randomly with an iPhone.
That's amazing, man. So again, just to stay on this topic for a couple more minutes, if that's okay, how would you suggest people interested go about trying to, I don't know, head down that path?
Sure. So what I would do is whatever your sound is and the thing that you love doing, do a lot of that and get a group of songs together, at least an album's worth of stuff that you have, so you can demonstrate that like it's not just you got lucky with one song. And then you can start reaching out. Like in my case, I was like it was we're in a networking business. It's about people. And so particularly that, I mean, I came into the business prior to the internet. So what did you have to do? You had to go out and meet people.
Yeah,
You had to be around. You had to show up to parties. You had to show up to everything, and you had to network your butt off because there was no other way to do it. Cold calling was a very normal kind of thing to have to do, and I did plenty of that back then. And a lot of definitely have encountered a lot of no's along the way. Before the yeses started to happen. But so that being said, no, have something that you really dig and you're making because I think it's the best way to do it because it kills two birds with one stone. If you really love it and you dig it and you're making the whole thing, great. You're winning already. You've made some shit you love and you can show people you're proud of. If nothing happens with it, great. No, and I'll get to the other part, so if you're doing that and then just go online and now there's all sorts of companies that do, non-exclusive deals and you can have two or three of them going, but you will need to have your administrative side together, which means, you've got to have instrumental versions. You got to have, maybe a vocal up, vocal down version, a few different versions of that. And, the great thing is we have the internet and you can look up on YouTube and the stuff, and there's probably people talking ad nauseum about some of this stuff, but basically just if you have an instrumental and a full version, that's great. That'll probably do it. And then within it, you need to put the metadata inside of those songs, which you can do on iTunes. iTunes absolutely just put if you open up your iTunes thing, depending on what version you're on, it asks the song, the writer. You put any information you want, and you put all that in there. So if your metadata is inside of the stuff, it's really going to expedite the process and actually let them know that you know what you're doing.
yeah,
So that's a worthwhile stuff. Now that being said, most of the time I'm working with people that handle that stuff for me. I just send the track out, and then if anything happens, that's when I cross that threshold with them because I'm not really cold calling people at this point.
of
But
course.
but if you're cold calling, doing all that, and don't be discouraged. Send it out to as many people as possible. And if anybody calls back, just say yes
Yeah,
and figure out what you can do to get in and become a trusted resource. Turnaround time's fast. I always say this: send error-free work, so they don't have to. They're not trying to like. There's not a. This sounds like kind of normal stuff people should know, but there shouldn't be any clicks or and you know how recording it can be very messy sometimes and
yeah,
all that. Clean up your edits. Make sure you got an ending. Try don't if you want to get in the sync world, no fades,
yeah.
no faded endings. Always make sure you have a definitive ending. And better yet, if you have a
Oh,
or
like a
something.
tag, yeah,
Not a tag, yeah, we call them stinger endings. So yeah, if you have the stinger on there, that's cool. But a definitive ending, and if you really want to do this sync stuff, also make your song very editable, where you can edit it and do edit points. Because a lot of times what they do is they take your thing and they might break it out and like I have a song that I did that was a direct TV theme song for 4 years, and the version that they have, versus the version that everyone hears is like they hear the intro, a little bit of a chorus, and then like part of the bridge and some other thing. They completely cut it up. Make that easy for them.
yeah,
Because at the end of the day, there's editors that are dealing with all this stuff.
yeah,
So they like using your stuff and they know that's easy to edit. So yeah, make sure it's like, work it out. It needs to feel great, obviously, all the above, but make it editable. Make it when I do edits and I cut and paste that to cut and paste that, it just there might be a little click or something. The least you want to have to do is do a few fades and get it in. So that's one thing. Oh, and then within the context, if you're making this kind of stuff, I'll give you a few words very quickly on this. Make things that are classic, but also current.
yeah,
It is 2025, but also, we have the whole history behind us with all that stuff. Theme wise, I'll give you this. These are two gems. The two songs that during the period, the 14 years that I was doing it, they constantly were trying to get something that felt like we're Walking on Sunshine by Katrina and the Waves and I'm a Believer. If you can make something sounds like that, because they love that for movies when
Yeah.
it's like the thing happens and people are happy.
Yeah.
If you're going to go that route, that's kind of the route that I was in. Yeah. Also, your bridge. So in that case, but when your bridge happens in those songs, write a bridge that goes somewhere entirely different. That's kind of unexpected.
Okay.
They like that too. That gives them an opportunity to fuse something in there, and I had a lot of luck with that also.
Interesting. Great tips. Thank you. So, you get to a point where, and you mentioned some of these shows already, but you land up, getting some of the bigger shows, the Bernie Mac show, the Think You Can Dance, the American Idol, some really well-known shows. And I ask the first part more out of ignorance than anything. And that is, when you are creating specific sounds or sort of, let's say, audio clips for certain parts of the show, like maybe the interview thing on the Think You Can Dance thing, do they, and I'm not trying to get personal into numbers and your business and stuff like that, but do you retain royalties on that when those shows get replayed over the courses of time, or do they pay you a one-off fee?
Well, so there is a lot of roads lead to Rome. This conversation has to do with sort of where you're at with your career, the relationships that you have with people, how you get in, who you're dealing with. I will say this: I was blessed beyond belief to land So You Think You Dance in the way that I landed it. So what happened for me was I got 100% of everything.
Wow.
I got 100%. I got the upfront fee, which was way more back then because I was doing this between like 2005. My publishing deal went up to like 2018, 2019. But during the bulk of that, those earlier years, yeah, I was getting 100% of everything, and then yes, there was royalties on the backside, and it was international. I still get money from those shows to this day.
That's amazing.
So it trickles in now,
yeah.
But at the time, there was some nice publishing checks, or royalty checks that would come in from it. So the fact that I got 100% of everything is a huge rarity. And the only reason that sort of happened was that when I fixed that track for them, and they were like, "You want a job?" It wasn't really like a designated job. I was working directly with the music supervisor and clearance person because they were dealing with so much hip hop stuff that was coming in that when they would reach out to get clearance on stuff, everybody was claiming like, "Oh, I did 50%. I didn't." And it was like, none of the numbers were adding up. And they're like, "This is a pain. I don't want to deal with you." Hired Dave will just do it.
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking anything. I was a one-stop shop. So I could, yeah. So that was amazing. Most of the time, no, when I got my publishing deal, my publishing deal, I had a 50-50 split with the pub. Yeah. And then I think initially I had like an 80-20 split on the master side, but and I was signed to Songs Pub, which they no longer exist. They got bought by Cobalt, but it was ran. One of the owners was Carrie Ann Marshall, who's now the COO of Warner Chappell.
Okay.
And I've been friends with her forever and ever. So we went back. She was Busby also. We were all friends together.
That's cool.
So that being said, yeah, everyone, I also, like, even within that period, I created my own publishing company for a few years when I was in there. And I signed 10 different writers, and the different writers I had doing very specific different things for me. One did acoustic guitar cues. One did piano cues. One did rock cues. One did kind of soul cues. One did kind of more orchestrated stuff. And they would just send me stuff. I said, "Hey, just send me 1 or 2 tracks a week, and I'll get the stuff in," because I was working at that point. Like, I knew the lead editor was a good friend of mine. So I knew I met the other, they knew who I was. My hard drive would end up on their desk first thing Monday morning, mine with the first hard on top. So off we'd go. So everybody, not only did I make money, but everybody else made money around me.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's also clever because you essentially land up building a library, right?
Yeah.
Which, nowadays it's become so, "Oh man, I got a library of music, got a library." Yeah. Okay. Now, like you mentioned the internet earlier, now there's these libraries, and every musician you meet's got, "I got a library, I'm working on library music." But in the early 2000s, even as far as the 2010s, 2015s, this was not commonplace.
No. One thing, though, that happens a lot of times is, and I don't even talk about my back catalog, which is obviously, as you imagine, very vast, because I make things that are relevant for the time that they're being made. So at the time when I was doing a lot of stuff, what was the big thing that was going down? A lot of Black Eyed Peas, a lot of Neptunes, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I loved, and it was
Yeah, me
great.
too.
So that's not relevant now. It's not, that is not relevant. Sure, every once in a while you might plug that into something, but things have shifted, and that's part of the whole thing. Which is why I was saying about, like, the first thing is making, music that is classic, but absolutely current. It has to be current, because that's what they're looking for. Most of the stuff is driven by hit songs that are out there, and then this is, I called it ambulance chasing. The ambulance is running down. I'm right behind. The ambulance is the hit song, and I was right behind the ambulance with my song that was like slightly injured compared to the main song, the real song.
That's a great way to look at it. My last question in the sync world regard is, and I think I've potentially figured out your answer already just based on the conversation, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Do you represent yourself completely, or do you have somebody who, whether it's a publisher or a manager of some kind, that calls you up and goes, "Yo, Dave, we got this brief"? Or have you, because of your relationships and your years in the industry, are those calls directly to you?
I'm independent, and I have a rep. I have a rep at ASCAP, who, if anything happens, I can talk to them, and they'll deal with that. It's on that side if anything happens. But no, I'm independent. I was, again, for 14 years. I was in that world, and then they would have more than happily kept me going, but I was not happy doing that. And ironically, it was like the universe sort of conspired in my case, because I started scoring documentaries.
That's cool.
And so at that point, and I was the whole time always working on original music. So at that point, then I was just dealing, directly with producer and director, and all that other stuff sort of went, everyone else is still running down the road chasing that stuff. And I was just like, hey, it's been real. I'm still friends with a lot of those writers.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, we collaborate on things, or things come my way. But, unless something is really there for me in that world, I wrote so many songs. And, the thing for me was also, when I first started, every week or two, I was getting a placement. It was really amazing.
It's crazy.
And good money, real money back then. And so, I tell people, I had a few years, some nice 6-figure years going on through that stuff.
That's amazing.
But as time went on, and everything shifted, and everything went to streaming, a lot of people that historically met us still try to write for other writers, came to sync. So the sync thing just got, saturated, in which it is now. And everyone's, in matter of fact, when I was doing it, the internet hadn't even really broke out when I first got into it. So the knowledge about it was still a little bit hush hush. Not everybody knew really about it. And even people, in terms of like making it happen, unless they finally got paid, they didn't even understand how the money divvied out. So yeah. So it all shifted. So I was just like, you know what, I'd rather just independently do stuff. And so I'm independent.
That's amazing. So Dave, what do you think has been the hardest part about being a career musician for you personally?
Financial stability. You distill it down, everything else about it is wonderful, and I would not trade any of it. I've had dear communities in the Bay Area and in Los Angeles, which I currently have. Insightful into the, philosophically, and just about human beings, and in our experience here. Music's taught me so much about all that stuff. The one thing that has been just the most inconsistent thing ever, and you really, and I'm not alone in this, you have to make your peace with, is that the money's going to be incredibly inconsistent. I can get paid really well to work on something, but I know that money, so I'll look at that money and go, okay, here's my budget, and you have to become a great budgeter, because the good ones are great, and that can be a fun year. That can be a fun 2 years. But if you don't get something in between, you might get some other things that are smaller. But when you're talking, anything in 5 or 6 figures, you need to make those things last. And sometimes they back to back, and you have a good run. But I've been in this since I did my first record in 1989. So you can. It's been a long run.
In the same vein, what do you think has been one of the hardest things for you to get through in your career so far? And what I mean by that is, sometimes when you're on certain paths, whether you want to call them distractions or nudges or whatever they are, they sometimes hit you off that path. And for some people who seem focused, they find their way back to that path, and some people never do. And that's okay, because again, I too believe that you are where you need to be at the time. But have you ever had any things happen during the course of your career that have made you, I don't want to say second guess yourself, but have almost made it like, whoa, that was a tough thing there. I wasn't sure if we were gonna get through that kind of vibe.
The truth of the matter is, with my career, no. I've been, I've all taken it. I've never taken it for granted. And I think that that's a big part of it. My personal life has certainly been had plenty of challenges, and luckily I've settled that at this point in my life. But no, career wise, I think even though I didn't even really realize it, I've always been in service to music. So no matter what happened, I never really took it personally. I had, my first record was nominated for an award for like best independent LP when I was a kid. So like I started off, I'd say the biggest one of anything, if there's anything that I had to figure out about all this is that you just have to come to peace with everything's going to play out exactly the way it's supposed to play out. And there's no woulda, coulda, shouldas with any of this. And if you're supposed to have the next big thing, you absolutely, what's for you will never pass you by. And for a long, when you're younger, it's always like, okay, this, and even when I got the shows, when I was working on the number 2 show in the United States, it was like, this is amazing, and these bigger things started coming my way, and I wasn't even present for a lot of it because I was too busy kind of thinking about the next thing, and also juggling my personal life and all the stuff that was kind of going on with that. So no, I think if you are applying like other criterias to music, yes, you're going to encounter some disappointments. You're going to do a lot of things because you're going to be using a barometer that's not actually right for what you're really working with. Because we're working with ether. I mean, it's ethereal. You can't touch it. It's magic. It's one of the magic things that we get to do in all of this. So yeah, everything. Has there been challenges? Yeah, the challenges have been with other human beings.
Yeah, I
They
feel you,
haven't done.
man.
They've never been with music. No, music's always. I say my quote is this: "Music is truth."
Yeah.
You and I can tell how someone plays immediately.
Yeah.
The minute you play, no matter what instrument it is, I know exactly what you got within 30 seconds.
Yeah.
I can hear everything about it because it's such a fluid language in that way. But yeah, I think the biggest thing is just not assuming things or putting assumptions, or like, if I get this, then it's not gonna your personal. Here's the summation: if you don't have your personal stuff together when you move to Los Angeles and you're trying to make it, go for it. It's going to put its foot very far up your butt until you get that stuff sorted out. It's not even going to let you get near that, or it might even give you everything you want, but you're still going to. It's
Yeah.
not going to bring the thing that you really want, which in the end is just happiness, contentment,
Happiness, dude.
right?
Yeah, totally.
Just being okay being here and not needing that to be like, I need that.
Yeah. And that's been proven time and time again, right? Like, you had so many people in your walk of life that you meet that go, oh man, if I get that, I'm going to be happy. If I do this, I'm going to be happy. And they get those things and they do those things, but they're still miserable. And you go like, dude, you got to start being okay with you, dude. Like, something's not right. You got to stop chasing the imaginary dragon,
Well, that's the whole thing about it. And I think, like I said, music, because the way that the narrative is we're born into, and it's all there, the music industry and show business and the glimmer and the glamour and the different things that come along with it, and the excitement and the fun. There's so many parts to it that you'd only be human to you're only human, so you're going to like buy into that immediately. But if you dive into being a musician and playing instruments, it is absolutely going to reveal a whole other thing to you that has nothing to do with any of that. And like I tell people, my career is sort of 3-tiered. It's like I have my career is my music, but playing music is my hobby also. I just like I enjoy doing it. Like someone enjoys playing tennis, which I like doing too. But I just like playing. I enjoy it. And also, probably the biggest one of all, it's a spiritual journey. It really just opens you up to meet all sorts of people that you would never usually most people will never come across in their life. And you're going to learn things from these people that have experienced things that are just, you would have no other way to get to, but music is like directing you through it, because you're supposed to meet these people. You're supposed to learn these things, but it's all through the betterment of your experience here, right?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Dave, I have 2 last questions for you. The first one is, you've obviously done a shitload in your career. Well done. But, and this is not to sound too like, arty-farty, superficial. Have you got any sort of immediate goals that you'd like to try and achieve over the next, say, 5 years? And if so, what are they?
Well, funny if you answer. So I have an invention that is coming out, and it resolves the problem that every keyboard player has had their whole life, which is the sustain pedal moving. And I'm patent pending right now. And it's called the pedal stick,
Cool.
and it'll be in stores probably by the end of this year.
Amazing.
And that's what I'm going to be pushing on. Yeah, and it's such it's very serendipitous how it happened. I wasn't trying to invent something. It wasn't like we've all had that conversation about things. It happened quite naturally, and I kept seeing it through. And every step of the way, kind of like there's parallels to when things happen in music. When something's supposed to happen, it's absolutely going to happen, and it usually kind of happens kind of fast and it gets going. So, yeah, the idea. I got a provisional patent. Victoria used the invention over the course of a year, and then I applied for the patent pending, the full patent, which I'm in right now. During this period, I have a third party vendor who's wants to put it out for me, and I also have an investor now who's like completely just happened to mention to them, and they're like, "Oh, of course,
Amazing.
I want to be part of the whole thing." So there's that. To be honest with you, and that's business. Like, and in certain ways, I'm like, finally, I have something that's not like, "Hey, like my song," or like, it's like, no, I'm solving the problem. The neatest part is I've been bringing it to people and showing people. Like I've visited, Lisa Coleman and Dr. Fink from,
Prince.
from Prince Revolution.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my funnest thing with Lisa is I went to Henson Studios and met her there, and I just, "Hi, nice to meet you." Da da da. I put the thing out. I set it down, and she goes, "Oh my God, I want 3 of these right now."
Amazing.
And then the next day she took a photo of her foot on her sustain pedal, and she said, "Thinking of you."
Dude, that's amazing.
Yeah, but I met with Corey Henry. I've just all sorts of folks, man.
Yeah.
And so I'm still going to do an Indiegogo for it all. So
Of
just
course,
to try to do it.
yeah. Just do it all the things,
Yeah, but I have prototypes, so I got to wait till I get the actual manufactured version so that I can bring this to all these people and keep
Yeah.
it going. So, and the hard part right now is just also that it's come from being a very secretive thing to it's going to come out into the world. So,
Amazing. Well,
yeah.
dude, when you are ready, send me a link or whatever, and I'll add it to these show notes, even though this will probably be out before that, and I'll put it on the platforms that we have as well.
Sure, absolutely.
My last question is, what do you think has either been the best piece of advice you've ever received in regards to your music career, or if you can't think of something in that sort of vein, what do you think is something you've learnt along your journey that might help become good advice for someone else?
Okay, well, I'll give you the first one, and this was told to me by my friend Julian Neff, who's no longer with us. He died many years ago, but he told me, he said, "Whatever you put into music, it'll give you back." So if you put everything into music, it'll give you everything back, and it has proven to be entirely true. Like I said, to me, music is truth, and so if I put an hour into guitar playing, it's like meditation. I meditative. I feel better. I've gained a little something. I've gained a little more vocabulary, which is going to let me express myself a little better. So yeah, so it's kind of two of them. Yeah, whatever you put into music, it'll give you back. And music is absolutely truth. You can't lie in it. Especially when someone plays. And what was the last one you asked about? You said
it was basically, if you didn't have a piece of advice, what is something that you've experienced or learnt along the way that could be or serve as good advice for someone else?
And I hit it already. There is no woulda, coulda, shouldas in life at all, or music or anything. And everything is exactly as it's supposed to be. Everything happens exactly how it's supposed to be. Whether or not you like it or not is completely incidental. It's something for you to go through or to learn from or to experience. And what's for you will never pass you up. It'll always be for you. So just enjoy what you're making. Make things that you love. Don't chase things. Chasing doesn't work. Just do you, and always remember that spirit that you grew up with, that made you love music, and that fun part about it. Create that space. Keep that space together, because the world is a crazy place, and there's a lot of other nefarious things that are going on that will try to interfere with that. But if you can keep that pure, no matter what happens with it, you'll have a wonderful companion the rest of your life.
Amazing, man. Dave Tweedie, dude, thank you so much. I can't thank you enough. I know we sat on the syncing stuff quite a lot, and that we could have spoken about so many more things. I mean, we didn't even talk about your Enspirits project, but, I did talk about that with Victoria, and I'll link this to it anyway, so hopefully people will put two and two together. But, I figured your credits lent itself to today's topic, which is why I wanted to dive into that so deeply, because most of my guests have had some form of, I got this sync, I got that placement, and that's great, that's wonderful, so I figured, hey, this could be a great opportunity. So I can't thank you enough. And listen, man, I wish you nothing but the best with music, with life, with your invention, the pedal stick. Is that what you said it was called?
Oh, that's right.
That's amazing, man. I can't wait to see it. Every time I turn on a live concert or go to a concert and see it, I'll be like, I know the dude who made those things. It's amazing.
Well, what you won't see is you won't see the keyboard fishing for the pedal anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's so funny. Again, it's so funny that you said this, because I had somebody in here. We were working on a song on Friday this past week. She's a singer, songwriter, pianist. Really good. And dude, we had to end up retracking her part, because while she was playing, the pedal started moving, and it actually moved so much that at one point, we listened back and I was like, something doesn't sound right there. And she's like, oh yeah, the sustain's stuck, but I couldn't reach the pedal. So you're onto something, man. I wish you nothing but the best, man. Truly.
Thank you, Travis. Well, thank you for having me too. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Sweet. Dave Tweedie, everybody. As usual, I'd like to publicly thank Dave for his time. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for your time. Thanks for keeping up on this journey with us. I hope you're getting something from it. As I mentioned earlier in the show, definitely getting a bit of interest in regards to extra content. So if that's something that interests you, let me know and I'll explore it further. For now, if you need any help with your band or music career in general, please do drop me a DM or an email. You can find out more about myself at musicians-mentor.com. Make sure you check out everything Dave Tweedie. His links are in the show notes. And don't forget to check out his and Victoria's amazing band, Enspirits. That's it for this time. I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.